My name is Mary Whitmore, 36 years old, currently living in Austin, Texas. Today's the Whitmore family's annual gathering, an event where anyone not wearing a Rolex or carrying a Hermes bag is glanced at like they just crawled out of a basement. I've grown far too familiar with that feeling. Every year, they meet at my uncle's estate in the Dallas suburbs, where Porsches, Mercedes AMGs, and BMW M8S line the marble tile driveway. I quietly parked my over 8-year-old Subaru Forester at the end of the street, far from the judging eyes. I entered the foyer in a navy blue blazer I had bought during an end-of-season sale at an outlet store, brandless, unremarkable. As expected, the first eyes that landed on me belonged to Olivia, my cousin, 3 years older, who lives off her husband's credit cards, but always speaks as if she runs a multinational corporation. "Oh, Mary, still sticking to that, minimalist style," Olivia said, her eyes sweeping over my flats like she was spotting a clearance rack reject. I smiled, but didn't respond. Not worth the burden. Across the room, my uncle, Mr. Paul Whitmore, stood with a champagne glass in hand, laughing loudly with a group of oil investors from Houston. He was once my father's closest friend until a car crash took both my parents away. After that, Uncle Paul assumed the role of organizing family meetings, as if he were single-handedly carrying the dynasty. The room reeked of designer perfume and empty compliments. Enlarged photos hung on the walls: Ethan's Malibu mansion, my cousin, Julia's luxury yacht recently purchased with her husband in Florida, Uncle Paul's eldest daughter. The last photo was mine, taken during a financial literacy summit in Denver. Tucked away in a dim corner, blurred like a memory nobody cared to recall. Julia approached, a glass of red wine swirling in hand, her eyes gleaming with calculated pity. "Still living in that downtown apartment, Mary? So consistent of you. I know a few realtors who could help you upgrade a little, if you're ready." I maintained a polite smile. I'd heard those kinds of digs more often than my morning alarm. Dinner began with a high-end appetizer, pan-seared scallops drizzled in white wine sauce, served on bone china rimmed with gold. I sat amid conversations about investment returns, a new resort in the Bahamas, and the latest spike in tech stocks. When I brought up a community project I'd been working on helping single mothers access financial tools, no one asked a follow-up question. "Mary, you should consider building a stronger personal brand," Ethan said, smirking. "No one's really into this community service thing anymore. Kids need to learn how to make real money." The entire table burst into laughter. I looked down at the neatly folded napkin in front of me, a chill running up my spine. They never truly wanted to know what I did. To them, I was the stubborn cousin, the traditional one, the one who didn't seize opportunity. They didn't understand or care that I had chosen a different life, not because I lacked options, but because I refused to fake one. After dessert, as everyone stood up to mingle, Olivia leaned toward Julia, making no effort to lower her voice. "I honestly don't get why Mary even comes to these things. She doesn't belong here." Julia chuckled, shrugging. "Maybe she's hoping someone will offer her a job, or a husband." I stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was cold and quiet. Below stretched the lawn where tomorrow they'd erect the stage for the family's annual financial presentations. I knew exactly what was coming, another round of public wealth comparison, where I'd once again rank at the bottom, at least based on the numbers they thought they knew. I was 12 when my world shattered into 1,000 pieces. It was a Friday afternoon. A thunderstorm had just passed over Texas, and the scent of wet asphalt still lingered in the air. My mom called, telling me to pack for our weekend camping trip. But their pickup truck never made it to the lake site we'd planned for. The chain reaction crash on Highway 290 took both my parents in a matter of seconds. They said it happened fast, no pain, no time to react, but the numbness that settled in my heart was slow and merciless. It stretched over the years that followed. I moved in with my grandmother, June Whitmore, the only person in the family who had never treated me like a burden. Her home sat in South San Antonio, a weathered 3-bedroom wooden house with a backyard full of basil and mint. There were no luxury cars, no curved screen TVs on the wall, but it held something I'd never seen at Uncle Paul's mansion or Aunt Olivia's condo: peace. Grandma June wasn't the type to say, "I love you," every night, but she showed it in the way she folded my clothes neatly, left her job at the bookstore anytime I had a fever, and always saved me the window seat when we read the morning paper together. But what made her special wasn't just her kindness. It was her razor-sharp mind and no-nonsense approach to money that no other Whitmore had inherited. She was the first person to teach me how to check a credit report, read a balance sheet, and understand the difference between being rich and being sustainably wealthy. "Don't be fooled by shiny surfaces," she said when I asked why she still drove her 1999 Ford Taurus. "Truly wealthy people don't need anyone to know they're wealthy." On Saturday nights, while kids my age watched superhero movies or played video games, I sat on the cold wooden floor with her, highlighting property price charts from black and white financial newsletters. She gave me a little notebook for investment tracking. The first line she wrote in purple ink: "Make money work for you. Don't work for money for." When I turned 14, she showed me her own portfolio. Not flashy, but shockingly clever. A series of modest properties scattered around recovering neighborhoods, bought low, rented steadily, all under LLCs that no one knew were run by a silver-haired lady. At 15, she let me invest a small amount, $200 I had saved from weekend bake sales, into a mutual fund she helped me pick. I had to track its monthly movements, report on it, and write reflections on market trends. Back then, I didn't understand why she took that little money so seriously. Only later did I realize she wasn't teaching me how to get rich. She was teaching me how to live without depending on anyone's approval. Each summer, while my cousins vacationed in Europe or Hawaii, Grandma took me to abandoned property auctions. We drove through scorching heat, sat for hours in courtrooms, took notes, and analyzed risks. No one in the family knew. If they had, they would have laughed. "Mary's pretending to be an investor with high school savings." A few months before she passed, Grandma called me into her room and handed me a bundle of documents tied with a faded indigo ribbon. Inside were the legal records for a small parcel of land in the East Terrace neighborhood, an area just starting to draw interest from developers. "Mary," she said, her eyes cloudy from heart failure, "keep this as your first foundation. As for the rest, I trust you'll know how to build it." After she died, I didn't return to the family estate for years. They held a funeral, but didn't let me speak. Uncle Paul called Grandma June a good woman, but too frugal. That line made me leave the cemetery earlier than planned. I used the little money she left me, plus scholarships, to study finance, but the real lessons, I had already mastered those before I turned 18. I once believed that graduating college and landing a stable job would make family gatherings more bearable. I was wrong. Completely wrong. In the Whitmore clan, no one cared about degrees unless they came with a photo captioned, "New home in Scottsdale," or "Swiss vacation on private jet." Every reunion felt like a material status showcase, where the loudest, flashiest, and most extravagant person always sat at the head of the table. Uncle Paul, the center of every conversation, had an annoying habit casually asking about everyone's income under the guise of concern. "So, Mary, how's that public finance work going? Decent salary?" he asked, feigning surprise, as if still confused why I hadn't jumped into venture capital like his son. I just smiled. I was used to it. Aunt Cheryl, his younger sister, always arrived flaunting a new handbag worth more than the average monthly rent in Austin. Last week, she closed a deal on a penthouse in Miami Beach. No one asked about the mortgage attached to it, just oohed and awed over infinity pool photos and iPad-controlled glass doors. Then there was Julia, Uncle Paul's eldest daughter, now an investment partner in a startup likely bankrolled more by parental money than merit. She recently bragged about buying a Franck Muller watch with her quarterly bonus, though I knew for a fact she was paying off credit card debt at an interest rate close to 22%. That dinner, the whole table buzzed about an upcoming yacht show in Naples. Ethan, my cousin, freshly divorced for the second time, beamed as he spoke about the new Mercedes G-Class he'd bought to rebalance emotionally post-breakup. Gotta reward yourself, right, Mary? Life's not all about pinching pennies, he laughed, turning to me. Oh, wait, you're probably not into that luxury stuff. I calmly set down my fork and knife. I didn't need to respond. Olivia cut in, as usual, with a voice sharp as a razor. I heard someone's been buying property in up-and-coming suburbs. Cheap now, but with long-term growth potential. Didn't you mention a place called Round Rock? All eyes turned toward me, some curious, others condescending. What they didn't know was that I quietly owned 3 apartment complexes in that area through anonymous LLCs and brought in more rent each month than Julia's entire salary. But I simply smiled, sipped my water, and replied, well, I'm not great at predicting the future with yachts or Swiss watches, just trying to do something sustainable. The dinner rolled on with half laughs and sidelong glances. I was long familiar with how they measured a person's worth through golf club memberships and platinum credit card fees. But here's what they didn't know. I never played by their rules. I didn't need Instagram posts to prove I was doing fine. I didn't need a Tesla badge to hear, wow, classy at the gas station. I didn't need their understanding. I just needed the right moment to show them. And that moment was coming very soon. While they fussed over which shade of Italian marble to install in the 4th kitchen of their vacation homes, I had just closed a deal to buy the very building where 3 of them lived, under the name Everlyn Properties, LLC, with no paper trail linking it to Mary Whitmore. Every month, their rent payments were wired to an account they believed belonged to an out-of-state investment fund. None of them had a clue that the person they called Simple Mary, Conservative Mary, or Mary who can't keep up with the times, held the keys to the roof over their heads. I started with a rundown single-story house on the east side of San Marcos, Texas, a property the realtor called an untouched mess no one wanted. But I was different. I saw copper piping still intact, a solid foundation, and a location just off a soon-to-be developed road I had quietly tracked for 6 months. I bought it with savings from my financial consulting work and the first dividends from my portfolio. The deed was filed under Whitmore Ventures, LLC, a limited liability company I created and managed through a small law office in Houston. No one in my family had any clue. To them, I was still Mary, the woman driving an old Subaru, wearing off-brand blazers and living in a small downtown apartment. But every brick I touched was a step in the long-term plan I learned from my grandmother. I renovated the house, rented it out on a 1-year lease at a rate over 30% higher than the area average, thanks to smart upgrades and modern amenities. 4 months later, I refinanced, pulled cash from the appreciated value, and used it to buy the next property. I repeated that cycle for 6 years. No one saw me do it. There were no Facebook photos holding new house keys, no grand openings. I worked quietly, buying homes, small buildings, and eventually expanding into commercial properties. Sometimes I used as many as 4 separate companies to protect my identity, all designed to keep Mary Whitmore out of public records. As of now, I own a total of 15 properties, including 9 small rental units spread across Round Rock, Pflugerville, and North Austin. 3 commercial complexes, one of which is a Class B office building on Lamar Boulevard, and most notably, a 5-story apartment building called the Dawson, where 3 of my family members currently live: Ethan, Julia, and Olivia with her husband. That building came from a deal most major investors passed on. The former owner needed a quick sale due to a divorce settlement. I approached it through Everlyn Properties, LLC, a subsidiary I created for handling sensitive acquisitions. The entire process closed in 3 weeks. Quiet, clean, unnoticed. Right after taking ownership, I upgraded the security system, installed electronic key access at all entry points, and added a guest check-in policy via app. Though I kept rent slightly below market rates to avoid suspicion, I started receiving tenant feedback, including from Julia, complaining that the new management's a bit much. Ethan called me the week after that family dinner, annoyed. Mary, do you know who's managing the Dawson now? They changed the rules. Now you have to register overnight guests 3 days in advance. It's ridiculous. I kept typing out my quarterly earnings sheet as I listened, smiling softly. Maybe the new owner just wants to keep things secure. Who knows? It might even raise the building's value. He scoffed. If I knew who owned it, I'd call them directly. This anonymous stuff, no one trusts that. I said nothing. I didn't need their trust. I needed their rent on time. A week later, I got an email from the third-party property management firm. Several residents, including Julia, have requested a meeting with the property owner regarding the new security policy. I declined. My schedule was full. I replied with one short paragraph. Current policies are in place to protect the asset and the safety of all residents. Any requests will be recorded through the official management portal. Ownership does not meet with residents directly. That's how I built my empire, invisible but solid, adjusting the lights in the room without ever stepping through the door. They still think I'm at the bottom in this family race. But the truth is, I'm not even in that race. I'm buying the track, and they're running on my field, one step at a time. The next morning after the family gathering, I woke up in the attic room of Cedar Hollow, the ancestral estate on the west side of Fredericksburg, once owned by my grandmother, June Whitmore. The room still looked exactly the same as it had when she was alive. Faded floral wallpaper, an arched window overlooking the Vineyard Hills, and the oak vanity where she used to brush her hair every morning. For me, this was where all good memories began. I hadn't even left the bed when an email from Uncle Paul's assistant, the unofficial spokesperson for the Whitmore family, sent a chill down my spine. Dear family members, as scheduled for this afternoon's family meeting, Mr. Paul will present a formal proposal to sell the Cedar Hollow estate to restructure the family's dormant assets. Please note that a vote will be held immediately after the presentation. Regards. I clenched the phone in my hand. Restructure dormant assets? In plain English, sell off the only home that still carried my grandmother's soul just to split the cash. That morning's breakfast was icy. I walked into the dining room with a black coffee in hand, just in time to hear Olivia brag about a $2.8 million offer from an out-of-state investor ready to buy land in Marble Falls, if the estate was taken care of this month. Cedar Hollow sits on prime development land in the hill country, Uncle Paul declared, like he was pitching a construction project instead of discussing the home our grandmother spent 3 years personally designing. I sat next to Julia. She glanced at me with a half smile. You should support selling the house, Mary. After all, you don't even live here. I placed my coffee cup on the table and kept my voice calm. Not living here doesn't mean it doesn't belong to me. She raised an eyebrow, about to reply, but was cut off by Uncle Paul tapping his glass. That afternoon, the whole family gathered in the estate's main meeting room, the one with vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows, where my grandmother hosted her first Christmas after Grandpa passed. Now, it was where they planned to decide this house's fate. Uncle Paul stood at the head of the table, resting his hand on a brown leather-bound folder. I understand Cedar Hollow holds emotional value, but emotions shouldn't hinder progress. This area is rising in value. If we sell the estate, we could evenly split the profits. Roughly $12 million after taxes and legal fees. Murmurs spread across the table. Some nodded. Ethan exclaimed, "That's a win." Julia started asking when the money would be distributed. I raised my hand. What gives us the right to sell what Grandma built with her life? This isn't just property, it's a symbol. Uncle Paul raised his brows, not in surprise, but in disdain. Mary, you work in community outreach, right? Symbolic assets may sound poetic, but we're talking about tangible value. This is about numbers, not nostalgia. I swallowed the anger burning in my throat, not because of the words, but the tone. He had never believed I was qualified to speak on financial matters. Do you know Grandma left a clause in her will that Cedar Hollow could only be sold with unanimous agreement? He smirked. Clause applied while she was alive, Mary. We can revise it now. The asset is frozen in value while the heirs need liquidity. You should understand that if you have any investment knowledge at all. I met his gaze. Then perhaps I should present some data. He paused, frowning. What data? I didn't answer. I stood up and pulled a USB from my pocket. Last night, I'd worked until nearly 3 a.m. preparing my presentation. I plugged it into the projector, and the screen lit up, showing a decade-long chart of hill country real estate values alongside a report on the cultural significance of heritage properties, assets that can't be priced in dollars alone. Frowns creased several faces. Julia looked confused. Ethan glanced toward Uncle Paul. Only one person smiled slightly. Jessica, my distant cousin and a lawyer, the only one who had never belittled me. Uncle Paul walked over to stand beside me. What are you trying to prove with this? I lifted my chin. That if this family wants to sell the house like some product, I won't let it happen without a fight. Some things can't be divided into shares. Some things belong to blood, not balance sheets. The room fell silent, and in that moment, I knew this battle was just beginning. But I was ready, not because I wanted to fight my family, but because I was finally strong enough not to let them erase everything my grandmother ever built. I thought the data presentation I worked on last night would at least slow them down. Maybe I was too naive. The meeting entered the open discussion phase after Uncle Paul wrapped up the Cedar Hollow sale proposal with one last line. Everyone needs cash flow. We can't hold onto a house forever just because of feelings. I hadn't even opened my mouth before Ethan spoke up. You know, Mary, we really admire your persistence, but maybe it's time to be a little more realistic. No one blames you for not quite keeping up with the family's pace. I turned to him. But then, what do you mean? He shrugged, completely unfazed. I mean, the rest of us are out here investing, making returns, contributing to the family's assets. You're still driving that old Subaru and wearing off-brand clothes. We don't want you to keep stressing yourself out just to keep up appearances. Julia chimed in, her voice soft but laced with venom. Exactly. You don't need to prove you're independent like that. We could set up a support fund. Just a small allowance for those who aren't quite financially self-sufficient yet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Uncle Paul clapped gently as if trying to ease the tension, but only made everything worse. Actually a great idea. Let's call it the Family Stabilization Fund. It'll help members with special circumstances not worry about basics like housing, transportation, or party attire. Mary, what do you think? The whole room turned to me. A few people tried hiding their smirks behind their hands. Olivia didn't even bother. She looked at me with a mix of pity and scorn, then leaned over to whisper something to her husband. I sat still, fingers gripping the edge of the table. Inside my head, a wave was rising, churning between rage and exhaustion. I had ignored the condescending looks. I had brushed off the sarcastic remarks for years. But this, sitting there while they calmly discussed creating a relief fund for me, like I was some kind of failure leeching off the family, this crossed a line I didn't even know I had. I stood, slowly but not trembling. Uncle Paul, if I understand correctly, you're suggesting the whole family pool money together so I don't suffer? He nodded, with a face so serious it bordered on ridiculous. Not charity, just temporary support. Everyone falls on hard times, Mary. You're just a little behind the curve. We're family, after all, right? I looked around the table, and everyone here truly agrees with setting up that fund. Honestly, no one answered, but the thick silence said it all. Brad, my cousin, shrugged and muttered. Better than sitting through another yearly speech about community consulting from a company no one's heard of. Might as well give real help instead of moral lectures. That was when I caught the look in Jessica's eyes, the only one in the room who'd ever stood up for me. She looked torn, like she wanted to stop this but knew it had gone too far. I nodded. Thank you, the fund sounds generous, but I'll have to decline. Olivia scoffed. You should think this through. You don't have anything left to prove. We get it. You're strong, but no need to keep suffering just for pride's sake. I smiled, a smile with no more tolerance behind it. Pride? No, Olivia. That's called dignity. And maybe it's finally time I show everyone here why I've never needed a single dollar from that pity fund. I walked back to my chair, pulled my brown leather bag onto the table, unzipped it, and took out a document folder, neatly organized, sealed in a leather binder. It wasn't time yet, but they had just chosen the quickest way to unmask themselves. I looked at each of them one by one and spoke in a voice as calm as if I were reading the weather report. Before we go any further with talk of dividing proceeds from the estate, maybe it's worth asking who actually owns the apartment complex three of you currently live in. No one spoke. No one laughed. I turned the first page. The company seal stood crisp and clear. Everlyn Holdings, LLC, legal owner of the Dawson residences. And I, Mary Whitmore, was the sole signatory on every document. I placed the stack of documents on the ebony table in the center of the room, the soft thud silencing every conversation. For the past 10 years, I've been seen as a burden, someone falling behind. Today, I think it's time we all reconsider our definition of value. I opened the file and pulled out a summary of personal assets. On the top, Elizabeth Trust Holdings under Whitmore Private Family Office. I handed copies to Uncle Paul and the rest of the table. Their eyes still carried traces of amusement. Until 15 seconds in, not a single smile remained. My current personal net worth after consolidating all real estate, LLCs, investment funds, and reinvested profits since 2015 is $78 million. This includes 15 residential and commercial properties with steady cash flow, including the Dawson, where Ethan, Julia, and Olivia's family currently reside. Brad jumped up, nearly spilling his water glass. What? You own that building? No way. I nodded. Correct. Every renovation, every policy change, approved by me. For the past 3 years, every rent check has gone to the parent company, of which I hold 100% control. Julia's face lost all color. But you don't have the right. I cut her off, placing another document on the table. This is the ownership certificate for 35% of Whitmore Heritage Group, the family company that manages all assets, including Cedar Hollow. Uncle Paul froze. That can't be. Most shares belong to my side of the family. You only inherited 2% from June in the old will. True, but you all forgot about those smaller shareholders who quietly sold off their shares over the past 7 years. And I, through 3 independent investment firms, bought every single one. I laid out notarized documents confirming the transfers. Shares once owned by distant cousins who had cashed out to invest in crypto or real estate in Florida. I was the buyer. No one had noticed. No one had seen me as a threat. As of this morning, after merging all holdings under Elizabeth Trust Holdings, I own 35%, enough to veto any strategic decisions, including the sale of Cedar Hollow. Silence. No arguments. I turned to Uncle Paul, the same man who once told me I lacked financial literacy. You said I couldn't separate emotion from real value. But if a woman can quietly buy up 35% of a company without anyone noticing, then who really lacks understanding here? The room was still. The only sound was the ceiling fan humming above. Uncle Paul slumped back in his chair. There was no contempt in his eyes anymore, only confusion and, for the first time, caution. Olivia tried to salvage control. Mary, listen, we could work together. Maybe a joint plan, redevelop Cedar Hollow into a luxury resort, split the profits. I shook my head. No. The estate will be preserved, exactly as Grandma June stated in the addendum to her will, currently held by my attorney. I'm converting it into a financial education and scholarship center for single mothers and financially lost youth, like I once was. Ethan slammed the table. His voice trembled with disbelief. What the hell are you doing with the family legacy? Charity? Not charity. Legacy. Carrying forward Grandma's real vision, not the so-called powerful bloodline you all like to chant about. Jessica stood then, clapping 3 slow times. Finally, someone who actually understood what June stood for. I turned to her, smiling. Thank you. I know, not everyone came here for money. Then I looked back at the rest of the table. If anyone wants to cash out or sell their shares, my lawyer can handle valuations and buyouts immediately. No need for further debates. I gathered my documents, carefully placed them back in my bag, and walked out of that conference room without ever looking back. 2 months after I silenced that boardroom, the Cedar Hollow estate had transformed, not in architecture, but in meaning. Gone were the wine parties flaunting designer bags and glittering chandeliers. In their place, the grand hall where my grandmother once hung an antique map of Texas was now a space for teaching financial literacy to single mothers. The former tea lounge of the Whitmore ladies now held 12 laptops, sponsored by me for introductory investment classes. I named the program June Foundation in honor of my grandmother, the only woman who ever taught me that money should carry responsibility, not ego. On opening day, Jessica was the first to arrive. She wore an ivory linen shirt, no expensive jewelry, but her eyes sparkled brighter than ever. "You actually did what no one else in this family had the courage to even imagine," she said, placing a bouquet of lavender beside Grandma's portrait. "She'd be so proud." I smiled, softly, but genuinely. "I didn't do it for pride," I said. "I did it because I owed her a promise." The attendees that day weren't the usual faces from family banquets. They were single moms, young women recovering from personal bankruptcies, people who had been denied loans because they didn't understand credit scores. They didn't know me as Mary Whitmore, the woman with a nearly $80 million real estate portfolio. They only knew me as the person helping them open their very first no-fee savings account. While I was explaining lease clauses to a small group, how to avoid predatory rental terms, my phone buzzed. A text from Brad. "Mary, I heard you're transferring your shares to a charitable trust. Are you sure you want to give up that kind of control?" I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit there, a living testament to the gap between us. They still didn't get it. I wasn't giving up control. I was transforming power into value. A week later, I signed the final directive. 51% of net profits from my active properties would now fund the Women's Economic Reentry and Education Trust under the June Foundation. The Dawson, once a symbol of the disregard I'd endured for years, would now donate 20% of its quarterly profits to rental subsidies for low-income workers. Julia, Olivia, and Ethan now knew who the true owner was, and none dared ask for family discounts anymore. They moved out quietly when their leases ended. I didn't stop them. For me, that chapter was closed. Uncle Paul called one late afternoon. His voice was rough. "Mary, I want to say I'm sorry for everything I said in that meeting. You've proven yourself stronger than anyone in this family ever imagined." I was silent for a moment, then replied, "I don't need an apology, Uncle Paul. I just hope that next time a child in our family strays from the approved path, you won't extinguish their fire so quickly." He choked out. "Could I contribute to the foundation? I want to make up for some of my mistakes." I nodded, though he couldn't see it through the phone. "The foundation welcomes all contributions, but you understand, no one can buy control here." I hung up, then stepped into the backyard, where Grandma's rose garden still bloomed. The April wind brushed my cheek, fragrant with fresh earth and petals. I placed my hand on the stone wall engraved with a brass plaque. "Wealth isn't how much you have, it's what you do with what you have, June Whitmore." I read it again, silently. Then I smiled. I was no longer Mary, the different one. I was Mary, the one who protected our legacy, not with money, but with will. And finally, I understood. Wealth doesn't live in a bank account. It lives in how you make others feel like they matter. Mary's story is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't about flashy displays. It's about building lasting value and using financial strength to lift others up. In real life, many quietly work in the shadows, overlooked for not showing off, yet they're the ones truly creating legacy. Recognition doesn't need to be begged for. It arrives the moment you stand up, live your values, and make meaningful change. What do you think about Mary's choice and how she redefined wealth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about life and family.